All right, football fans, it's Footy Prime once again. Wednesday, there's the small matter of the Canadian Championship, or as we call it in Footy Prime, the Cup and the Cup final. Fighting for the Voyagers Cup. Vancouver hosting Toronto FC. We spoke about it in depth last week, and there were a ton of comments and some really interesting ones. It seems whenever we mention Toronto FC these days, there's a lot of vitriol, frustration, anger, sometimes a little bit of hate. It's a bit sad. So today we're going to look at TFC and just how badly they need to win this cup. Please let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as per usual, and give us 5-star reviews. Even if you think it's worth 4, give us a 5 on Apple. It'll really, really help. So let's get some comments to start with before we bring the whole gang in here. And as I mentioned, it's all pretty negative. Here's one. TFC. Preference this by saying, I am a day one fan. Jimmy, I still remember that goal. I still have my BMO seat cushion that most people threw onto the pitch. Anyways, it's getting really hard to be a fan. Ticket prices cost more than they should. The team has run so badly, especially since Bez left. No coincidence. I can't watch games at home. Why in the fucking world did MLS think it was a good idea to go to a streaming service for their games? It's the MLS, for fuck's sakes. I live in Toronto. I already pay a lot of cable where I can watch all my Toronto teams. I already pay a lot for other footy streaming. It was such a crap move and a slap to the fans' face. Apple TV has made me hate the MLS now. Surely I can't be the only one who feels this way. Well, moving on to our next comment. I'm a season ticket holder from day one, and I find it hard to even give the tickets away. I donate them to my local soccer association. The kids get a charge out of it. The supporters section. Otherwise, nobody is interested in the dire on-field product. And here's one more for you. TFC, season ticket holder for 15 or more years. After Lorenzo left the game last night, I'm done. Received an email to purchase playoff tickets, a long shot, but and immediately opted out of the purchase, not spending a penny for this level or lack of from Lorenzo. Horrible signing, and hopefully he won't be back in 2025. All right, Dan Wong, Craig Forrest, Jimmy Brennan, Amy Walsh, JC. The people have spoken. They're not happy at all. And we understand it's been a trying season, a disastrous segment in TFC history the last number of years. But they can win a cup on Wednesday. Jimmy, you played for TFC. You won a cup. You worked in the head office. If they find a way to beat Vancouver, which would be a surprise, I think, given how Vancouver's playing, would that change the narrative to this season? Would we be looking at it as glass half full, so to speak?
Yeah, I think they're desperate to win this. They know how important it is that they win this championship. And obviously, if they get in the playoffs, and it's a good season. But if they don't win the cup and they don't make playoffs, it's an absolute disaster of a season with the squad that they have.
Well, Craig, I mean, that's interesting, right? To see that we're this point in the season, right? The run-in, and it can be either a disastrous season or a pretty good season still. Right? What does that tell you? I mean, where are you at with this team right now? Because they are, despite making very few moves overall, I mean, yeah, the face of the team looks a bit different compared to last year, but generally speaking, the core is still there. Last year was complete, utter write-off. This year, they're in the playoffs right now, as it stands. They're in the cup final. Where would you rate this season so far?
Well, I guess you could say it's progress, because the last 3 years they finished in the bottom 3, and the league keeps getting bigger, and they keep finishing in the bottom 3. So I guess they could call it progress. But you look at the two squads, Vancouver and the Toronto FC, and I look at Toronto FC and I was just like, this is a decent squad that should be doing better, in my opinion. I don't see why they aren't doing as well as they should be.
Yeah, you got to keep in mind too, Sharman, that they did bring in a lot of players. An awful lot of players. They brought in Etienne, Owusu, Spicer, Flores, Long, Langstaff. So there's a lot of players that they did bring in the off season.
Yeah, so that might explain Dubs the progress compared to last season, right? They have adapted it. New coaching. I know John Herdman came in late last season, but really it began this season as far as being on the sidelines. So can we call it progress? I mean, you saw the comments there. They're just 3. It's very hard to find a positive comment. I didn't see one in the last few weeks of a fan saying, actually, let's give these guys credit for what they've done. Are the fans just kind of hanging on to the disappointment of the last few seasons, perhaps, and not giving this current group enough credit for, if not turning it around, pushing themselves in the right direction?
Yeah, I'd just like to start by talking about the people who are commenting. I think if you're really overwhelmingly positive, it takes a lot more motivation to leave a comment. Whereas when you're filled with hate and vitriol and you're disgusted with the performance of a team or an individual, then you're more inclined to leave a comment. So I think there's a little bit of bias there. And I think we see that in the comments for our podcast as well. So maybe feeling a little bit of empathy for TFC and the criticism.
Let's hope that's the case.
Yeah. And maybe it's why we focus on a negative as well. So I think I tend to agree with Forrest there and playing, I think, devil's advocate a little bit, that the expectations are high because this franchise has won MLS Cup, because there's a ton of money that goes into player acquisition, into investment, and the kind of the behemoth and the juggernaut that is MLSE, that you can afford to make these big mistakes. But I think that if you zoom out, like the other side of the coin is that it's Herdman's first year. The influx of these new players means that there have to be adjustments made, that it's not going to work immediately. I think they had a way better start than anybody anticipated. And maybe now it's just kind of coming back down to the middle where maybe they should have been at the beginning of the year. So I think where they finish with the remainder of these games, where if you say compare them to CF Montreal, it's a pretty easy route to the playoffs. I mean, it's still going to be difficult for them to get in, given the form of the entire season, but their opponents in these remaining games are much easier than TFC's. So I think once the dust settles, then you make kind of your evaluations on this team, on Herdman, on the DPs, but it's a way better season than the one that they put out last year. So I think it has to be looked at, I think, objectively, and that's very difficult if you're a TFC fan.
I think part of the issue is last year when Herman came in, he had 15 games or so that he sat on the sidelines to analyze what was going on. Then he had an off season. He brought in a lot of players. He's had them during preseason. They had a decent start to the season. But when you look at this team now, they've got 17 losses, which is second worst in the league. Conceded 55 goals. And you're the third highest paying roster in the league. So you understand the frustration of the fans and where they're at right now, thinking, okay, this manager's come in, he's going to change things around. Has he really changed things around? No. Are they performing the way that they should be? No. That's a frustration. And people talk about, you see after the games where people say, we have no identity as a club. It looks like we're just playing off the cuff. We've had too many losses, no good results. You're relying on Bernadeschi to do something because Insigne is doing absolutely nothing. So the performances is what's really hurting the fans. This team just has nothing to them. Nothing to them. And they're in the East right now, and the East is terrible.
Yeah, it isn't good. The West is so much stronger right now.
The West is way stronger than what the East is.
Where's TFC? Go ahead, Doug.
Sorry, Sharms. I just wanted to ask you guys who know TFC, who watch TFC way more than I do. I kind of have just superficial knowledge of the group. But do you think that Bernadeschi and how outstanding he's performed this year, do you think that does a lot to cover the warts and the underlying issue with this team? Like the kind of complaint or the negative around Bernadeschi is overwhelmingly positive, but that is for himself, that it's kind of in isolation. So if you take Bernadeschi out of the equation, then maybe we're talking about a team that's in a much more dire situation than they actually find themselves in, right?
I find it really interesting, actually, the Burner argument, because Dubs, you're right. A lot of the comments were actually criticizing him, saying, yeah, he's playing really well, but he's only playing for himself. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, I don't really get that. Okay, yeah, attacking players, even though he's playing at a wing back, attacking players are generally pretty selfish and are playing for themselves. in many ways. But it seems like the two Italians really can't win in a lot of fans' hearts, no matter what they do. Now, Insigne is different. Okay, we'll get to him, and I don't want this to become a Insigne.
I think Berna's winning
evisceration.
though. Terms. I think he's doing well.
Oh no,
You
I
think he's winning? I mean, like if you're comparing the DPs, it was like a
No. Meaning,
he's well in the lead.
Meaning, to your point, there's you can't win in certain. Hey, we paid too much for him at a certain point, and we all know this as athletes. At some point in our lives, you have to play for yourself, and you playing for yourself changes the attitude of the team. Where, hey, that amazing performance or that amazing play can turn the tide. And sometimes that's all you can hang your hat on is I'm an athlete. I'm going to be professional. And that can change how things are. And honestly, I look at a guy like Oso, who's been playing really well for TFC. And if 2 or 3 guys are in that space moving into the playoffs, as we talked about earlier, the playoff, like how's the season going? We still don't know. If they go 2 or 3 deep into the playoffs and make the playoffs, win the Canadian Championship, that guy who conflated like how much it's costing him to the cable, MLS.
He's not watching it though, is he? He's not watching it. He won't be seeing
Well, he's saying he's not, but he's going to. Like, this is how crazy it is. This 4-week span can change everything for TFC across the board for how you're going to look at the season, and even more, how we'll look at Herdman. If he can have like 4 weeks of victories and moving success, it's incredible.
Well, he might need it as well, right? I mean,
he needs it.
He
needs
investigation,
it.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's so much off the pitch here as well. But yeah, the Berner thing's interesting because I mean, he's not playing for himself, or he is playing for himself, but he's playing at wing back, right? It's not his position. He's kind of Hubman's reinvented him in that position. I haven't heard him complain about it, Jimmy. He seems pretty happy in that role. To me, he's kind of taken the team on his shoulders in many games.
Well, he has to, and you see at times he's trying to do that little bit extra, trying to make something happen in a match. And he's playing different formation. For me, I don't like the way that they're playing him. He needs to be higher up the pitch. Far too often he's so far back defending. He's more creative when he's going forward. But the 2 best players on the team for me that change the dynamic of the squad is Oso and Richie Larea. They're the 2 best players on this squad. And the other problem that they have is discipline. The whole team, they've got the most yellow cards in the league, 84 yellow cards. They're 3rd in sending offs. They got 5 red cards, which means that the discipline needs to be better within the squad. And that comes from the coaching staff. That comes from them. And they've got to make sure that they have every player that stays on that pitch for the remainder of the season.
That's almost 3 yellow cards per game. They've played
exactly.
31 matches. That's 2.71 yellow cards per match.
It's ridiculous.
Well, in fairness, though, I mean, last
showing
couple
off.
of years,
Cubs is
Math
just showing
brought to you
off.
by my iPhone.
but the last couple of years, they've been so disengaged on the pitch. At least yellow cards suggest maybe they're engaged.
Or does it mean frustration?
Could be that as well. Yeah.
Or late in challenges.
You're late. You're behind.
Just a little bit.
That's why you're getting booked, Sharms.
But I mean, listen, the narrative is so negative around this team, right? But I just think, are we taking it a little bit too far because we're so jaded from the last number of years? Craig's mentioned it, right? How they haven't just been bad the last number of years. They've been abject, right? There's been, Chris Armas, who was apparently awful, didn't know how to coach a football team, doing pretty damn well right now with the Rapids, right? He can coach, apparently. Now, Bob Bradley, in fairness, was just let go at Strasbourg in Europe. Like this past week, he walked away, right? I don't know. Are we unfairly maligning this group of players, Craig, just because of how jaded and frustrated we have been? And I say we, I'm saying, let's say we're fans. Yeah. We're not fans necessarily, right? But we're speaking for the fans. Are they jaded because of the previous number of years that they don't see the progress being made this year?
I understand it. Toronto FC fans are incredibly loyal. They show up on a regular basis, even after these last few years. Is pretty impressive. And then on the other hand, if you're Toronto FC, things can change around pretty quickly. They can win this Canadian Championship game against Vancouver, and somehow manage to get into the playoffs, win a few games, have a run, things can change very, very quickly. And I think that's probably the mood, or probably what they're trying to sell inside that dressing room, that, hey, there's always another game and it starts tomorrow night and it can be season changing.
I think, though, Dubs, internally, they've kind of written this season off, right? And they'll deny that. But here, last week, John Molnaro on TSU Republic interviewed Jason Hernandez about the cap situation and why there weren't enough, high-profile moves this season. And the message coming from that was, listen, we didn't realize the extent of the cap restrictions when we got this job. And we soon realized that it would be very, very hard to improve within the season. And that next year, 2025, all this cap room opens up and we can make changes. For them to talk about that in season this year suggests to me that they don't expect a hell of a lot to happen this season for the remainder of it. That if they're being honest, they're not confident. Is that me reading too much into those comments?
No, I think you're right. It's much like in Montreal, where things started off really positively, and then mid-season, when things started to go pear-shaped, they referred to it as a transition year. So it's just about reframing the narrative, right? For the fans who, obviously, I think TFC they don't want to accept mediocrity. So I think, that's a calculated move to go out there and to talk about that and say, listen, this is the situation we find ourselves in, and it may be rooted in truth. But I think it's a way just optically to make the team look a little bit better. But going back to JMO and what he said last week as well, I think you posed the question, and Forrest, you brought this up. Like, yes, if they win this Canadian championship, if they win the cup, it's flashy, it's silverware, it's meaningful, but it does little, I think, to sate that fan base. I think if they do that and then they miss the playoffs, you still have a fan base that's up in arms about all of the money and all the players and Herdman who's in, and it's all for naught in terms of the league.
What if Insigne scores a hat-trick tomorrow? It's the temptation, the teasing, right? Because
are you talking about the guy that hasn't scored in 11 games?
Hey, he's got 4 in the season.
A hat trick.
But he's got it. But we know that he has it within him, right? Whether we see it or not, who knows? Or at least he used to. Maybe he hasn't got it anymore. I don't know. But he's got that game-breaking ability. And is there any way he can turn around the narrative on him, or is he just done? He's got another season.
A hat trick within 70 minutes, because that's all he plays.
That bumps his numbers, though. Then in his goals scored per minutes played.
That's true.
You're being generous, Jimmy.
It'd be nice if it was equal to the yellow cards per game, right? It was like at 2.7 goals per game.
Get the calculator out.
That'd be outstanding.
I want to ask Sharms and Craig and Jimmy most of all this question. Worst is what are the 3 worst signings for TFC? As you guys have covered them and been part of them. Defoe, Insigne, who's the third?
Oh,
and
that's
is Defoe the even in there? I don't know. I can say Insigne's top 3, but is there anyone that pivots around and kicks him down? Was there a worse signing? Not just on the money level, it's got to be both money and expectations.
I think Defoe is number 2 behind Insigne.
And was there a number 3, Sharms, Jimmy? You guys remember a third that you went?
Laurent Robert, right, Jimmy?
Laurent Robert, yeah.
He was done. He had no knees left.
No, his knees were
Frings had moments, right, at least, but he was broken as well when they signed him.
Yeah.
All right, so our top 3, Footy Prime, we're going to write this down from 3 to 1 right now. Laurent Robert, Defoe, right? Because he was a bloody big deal. And then to top us off is Insigne. Worst signings ever for TFC.
I'm trying to think if there's, Robert was there, so he wasn't there long.
No,
right?
he wasn't.
They weren't tied to him. Was there someone else?
Brennan's number 4, Danny Dicchio number 5.
For the money spent, I would say Insigne might be the top 3 of worst DPs in the history of MLS.
Yeah.
What about Toronto sports scene? Maybe the worst signing ever. David Clarkson with the Leafs is pretty appalling. That was a bad deal, but they got out of it. I don't know how you get out of Insigne. That's the thing.
No.
Because like Jimmy mentioned it last show, the money he's on, I don't think he's going to walk away from that money. And who's going to take it on?
No.
Right? He was speaking to Italian media this past week and said sometimes he thinks about returning home.
Keep playing like you're playing. They won't take him back.
No, well,
Right?
no one's going to sign him at this point, at least not for that, not for the money that.
No, but even more because he keeps showing that sourness and lack of enjoyment. No one, and it turns so quickly with that guy, right?
Yeah, but then
He's mercurial. He's mercurial. Thank you,
training.
Dubs. I knew you'd like that word.
But people who are
I
at
like
training
it a
all the
lot.
time, they say he seems happy at training, that he's popular with his teammates.
Mm.
Right? He's not
Driving in his Rolls Royce.
From his house
It
to
is
the
some
stadium, he's in the best mood, right? He's got the music pumping. He's in his Hummer, the biggest car for the littlest man. Then he shows up on the pitch, and he's just a fucking grump. You know that's happening.
Do you think he has a bespoke booster seat? It's like Dolce and Gabbana.
Do you think it does deep down in the room? Jimmy, Craig, Dubs, you guys have been in rooms. We've all been in rooms. So I'm in a room right now, but a locker room. Does it deep down rub his teammates the wrong way? Do you think that perhaps he's not playing hurt?
Yeah, I would
Living
hate
up
to
to
see his face
expectations?
every day.
You would.
Yeah, it would drive me nuts.
Me as well.
I hate your face. Jimmy, would it drive you nuts?
Yeah, it would drive me crazy. I wouldn't
Do you have
be able
any
to-
anecdotal evidence, like players that perhaps, I'm not saying to the extent of Insigne maybe, but when you played the game, was there a player that just never achieved the heights that he was being paid to reach?
No, I don't think I did play with guys that were like that. Every guy in all my teams, they were honest, hardworking guys. But to what Forrest is saying, when you got a guy that's getting paid that much money, and not performing, not even finishing 90 minutes, picking up little injuries all the time, that would drive me nuts.
Even a guy like Paolo Di Canio, as brilliant as he was, there was times on the road where he was a passenger, and that frustrated players, and he was called out for it.
How'd that go? Who called him out? The coach or the other teammates?
Oh, teammates.
And did he listen?
Yeah, Harry didn't really say much to him because he knew that Paolo would lose his mind.
Mm. And did Paolo listen? Did he get the gist of, hey, you lazy fucker?
Yeah.
He did listen.
He would have a sick note on tough games. Like if it was Manchester United away, he might have a hamstring if he thought he was just going to be chasing shadows all day. However,
Really?
in the FA Cup, he did score a brilliant goal at Manchester United and won that 1-0. So, not to say he wasn't a genius, but he didn't show up sometimes on away games.
But he's still revered at West Ham, right? The fans still think of the Paolo Di Canio era with great love.
Oh, amazing.
He's legend.
Yeah. Legend.
Despite being enigmatic.
Good word, Sharms.
Because he had the moments.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for those moments for us. He said, listen, Insigne has scored some great goals.
Mm-hmm.
He's had some great games, just not nearly enough, not consistently enough. And when the going gets tough, when you
tough
want
get going.
That's right.
Going gets rough. The tough get rough.
The minute I said that, I knew someone's going to jump in with
we'll climb any mountain. We'll cross any sea.
I think
the
that's
ocean.
where it goes back to what your question and what Forrest and Jimmy were saying, like where, of course, it rubs guys the wrong way, right? And whether he's been called out, I'm not sure, but is there enough intrinsic motivation on Insigne's part when he's being paid that much money to change the behavior? I just think he's reached a point where he just does not give a fuck.
Well, Herman's comments last game, we spoke about that on, when was it last Thursday, right? Saying that he has to play in these games. He knows that he has to play, but he felt some tightness. and came off. And then the next sentence he's saying about Ozo. Ozo felt tightness. He played on for 10 more minutes. He wanted to keep playing on, but he couldn't anymore. It's like Ozo knows he'll give it everything. He'll die. He'll bleed out there.
Yeah, that gives you a good example of what their thoughts are on Senior is.
Yeah, but he could turn it around. Like I said,
Yeah,
good.
Yes, he could.
It's not too late. I don't think it's too
no
late.
evidence to the contrary, though,
No,
right?
there
He's been
isn't. There's
given
none.
the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So based on his behavior, I think there's no question, that if the question's posed, he's going to be a friend or a foe, right? He's going to be a foe. Been working on that for a bit.
That is good.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, really sad on that.
Oh,
I need to get that one out, weren't you?
Yeah, get it off the deck.
Friend or Defoe. Wow. And Defoe went back to England, did really well again. He played well.
Isn't he still playing?
No,
He's one of those guys, right?
He's just retired now, isn't he? I think he just.
I don't know, but I know he was
doing a lot of media, a lot of
Okay.
BBC, a lot of Match Day Live.
Yeah, defo.
Yeah.
when you're when you're getting a DP, you got to do a lot of research on somebody and know their comfort zone, where what it would be. You think anyway, coming out of that.
But that was the infamy around Insigne signing originally. Bill Manning says, "I was just trawling through transfer market, and who's a free agent this year? Oh, this guy is, and he's small and Italian. That's worked well for us in the past. Let's sign into a massive deal for 15 million per.
Well, maybe they should do Maybe they should do the same research for managers. Like Bill Bradley has been failing upwards.
Bob as well.
Bill Bradley.
Bill Bradley.
Bob Bradley.
Bill Bradley.
He was a GM for the New York Knicks at some point. Yeah. Or a basketball player. Yeah. Anyways,
I'm just picturing Bob Bradley with like really severe drawn on eyebrows as like his evil twin. That's what I'm picturing as Bill Bradley.
But how does that guy?
I'm Bill Bradley.
That's right.
Is it really familiar? No. Didn't you coach here before? No.
Going in for a job interview?
Oh, wait on.
That's pretty good.
really big sideburns.
Yeah.
But bald still. No. If he was bald with the big sideburns,
oh yeah.
that's a good look.
Although there's no
upside down
right
head.
now. There's no pres at TFC right now, is there? So everyone answers to Keith Pelly, right?
Keith Pelly?
Yeah.
I don't think there will be a president.
No, it's restructuring it all, aren't they? Yeah. GM answers to MLSE boss, maybe. Do you think will that change anything? Do you think, Craig, the whole Rogers, MLSE, Bell moving out? Eventually, Larry Tannenbaum is speculated he'll be selling his share in MLSE at some point. He's been probably TFC's biggest backer over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Change on the horizon. Could they be up for auction? One wonders. They're bleeding money right now.
Who's bleeding money?
TFC.
Oh.
Not
Yeah,
MLSE.
but when they're under that MLSC umbrella holding company, all those teams are just marketing arms for the other teams, the Raptors, the Leafs, any of the successful sides that carry everything else through. And, we're always talking about business and sports business. And Craig and I had this conversation on the weekend, was when it works for you to lose money. This is the whole Mother Carlson on WKRP. You keep a team because you want the red, you want the financial issues, because that's good for the other side of things. You want to carry losses forward. And unfortunately, it's a bad look, because it's the integrity. You miss a lot of the integrity, but it really is, a big business, and it's good to be a loser sometimes, right? That's what's sad about all this.
It's about rights fees as well, Wonger, isn't it? I mean, franchise fees, rather. I mean,
franchise
they bought
fees
TFC for $10 million.
Yeah, broadcast rights, all of those things fall into space, right? Like, what is your broadcast rights? Rogers now owns everything across sport, including the Blue Jays. Blue Jays, even though they have a pathetic on-field product right now, still raking in the money, right? So,
But MLS is different though, because they have the Apple deal, as that listener viewer mentioned. You know, the Apple deal means that it's not the same as, you know, putting up a bid for tender every 3 or 4 years. They're there for the long haul.
Why would they want to get rid of TFC? You bought it for 10 million. They're worth 600 million now.
Yeah.
That's why right there.
Oh, you'd want the 600 million.
Do
Yeah.
they need it?
Well, but listen, if
Do you keep
Eddie
holding on?
Rogers wants to bring the NFL to Toronto at some point, right? Which is he probably does. He's got to raise a lot of money to do that, a lot of money. And if Rogers MLSC is this new efficient beast, they got to raise money still. There's big debt. Rogers, as big as they are, they have a huge debt as well. So if you can sell a TFC for whatever it comes to, like 10s, 20s, like so much more than you bought it for.
Yeah, but it depends if you want to be cash heavy or cash light, right? Like debt isn't a bad thing.
Oh no, I know.
These spaces, right?
Trust me,
So.
I run a business.
Yeah.
MLS has such a big upside that there's no way that they're selling Toronto SC. Is my opinion. The franchise fees just keep going up and up and up, and they can afford to lose.
Well, not just afford to lose; they want to lose. It's not just affording to lose. This is right. They like to lose money in certain aspects of their holdings because it brings down profit, gives them a lot more write-offs all across the board. It's math. It's success through subtraction, right? And it allows them to keep things under certain thresholds, move the narrative of, hey, we need tax breaks, all of that kind of stuff, right? It's a intricate kind of, Rubik's Cube of all different parts, and you never know what they're up to is the problem. It's problematic.
Here's my hot take, right? And it's based on nothing other than just a hot take, right? Is this that MLSE will be open to selling TFC. Larry Tannenbaum, who loves TFC, loves soccer, just bought Saint Etienne, is going to sell up his share of MLSE for lots of money. And then his Kilgore group will come in and make a bid for TFC. That's my hot take.
It's a good one. It's fun. Plus, Larry Tannenbaum, Sharms, big part of the new WNBA team, right?
Yeah.
So he's got he's part of the Saint Etienne group with Kilgore. That's right?
Yep.
And then also he's big part of this new WNBA team, which with Caitlin Clark and with the drama they have in the WNBA, they're writing their own amazing narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's just a thought that crossed my mind last week, and all this stuff went down. It might be an option because, listen, part of the reason why MLSE like their sports properties is because they can control their broadcast rights and own them. They don't have that with MLS,
right?
Because Apple have it all. It's a centralized contract.